Welcome to Giant Cocktails, a podcast where two lifelong fans talk about the San Francisco Giants while drinking homemade cocktails. Now, here are your hosts, Ben and Matthew Henry.
Hello, and welcome to another boisterous episode of Giant Cocktails Midweek Review. I'm your host, Matthew, the Sultan of Stats, Henry, here to bring you the best baseball banter and cocktail concoctions. And joining me, as always, is the unparalleled maestro of mixology and monarch of the mound, Ben, the Viscount of Velocities. Is that how you pronounce it? Viscount? 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 See, I don't know. Anyway, with his royal shaker in hand and a fastball that could make even the toughest sluggers tremble, he's here to keep us entertained and enlightened. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and get ready for a home run of a show. Let's dive into the game highlights and the drink delights that make the Giants roar. Cheers! Monarch of the mound, Viscount? See, ChatGPT just can't be smarter than me. Like I don't like it when it gives me words that I don't even know how to pronounce. I've seen it many times. I've read the word. I don't think I've ever said the word aloud. Are you going to enlighten me? Are you going to tell me how it's pronounced now?
I'm going to enlighten you. It is Viscount.
Okay.
Viscount. Which is surprising to me because I think whenever I pronounce this in my head, I always said Viscount.
Okay.
Matthew, what is a Viscount?
Something to do with royalty.
Okay.
That's all I know.
Okay. And what was I was the Viscount of Victuals?
Of velocity.
Oh, of Velocity.
Yeah. Oh, so a Viscount is a British nobleman ranking above a baron, but below an earl.
Oh, that sounds like me.
Yeah.
I'm not too hoity-toity.
No, yeah.
You're
just regular toity.
That's right. I'm definitely no earl, though.
No. You're a little bit higher brow than that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Did you ask me how I was doing, or
maybe? Yeah. How you doing?
Yeah. I'm doing well. Matthew, I'm a little bit sad.
Yeah.
Because the great Willie Mays passed away, as I'm sure all of our listeners know by now. It was almost impossible to miss there for a moment. I'm sad, but also I am just amazed by all of the stories that we've seen and heard about him. And I think you called me the monarch of the mound. Yeah, I think Willie was the monarch of, he was the monarch of baseball, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit sad, but that aside, I'm also a little bit sad because our team has sunk below homeostasis.
Yeah, I have decided, since I have more control over the Wednesday episodes than the Sunday, that we're really not going to talk about that all that much today because
okay.
I'm kind of tired of talking about how poorly the Giants are playing, and gosh, we could have won 2 out of 3, but we didn't, and why is that? And it's it's poor pitching, and then it's poor hitting, and then it's flip flop at the next game. So that's the analysis of the Cubs game.
And boom, there you go. That's the analysis of the Giants for today. We're going to spend the rest of the day talking about other things.
That's right. So before we do that, though, what are you drinking today, Ben?
Well, Matthew, I am a thoughtful and brilliant person, so I was making my perfect cocktail for the show, and my wife asks me, "What did you make today?" And I said, "I made a Bobby Burns." And she says, "You didn't make a Willie Mays themed cocktail?" And I looked down at my watch, and I looked at her, and I'm like, I'm supposed to start recording in 4 minutes. Where were you 23 minutes ago? And then I said, and then I couldn't have done it because it was going to require 24 ingredients. And she was like, no, he just needs 5 because he was the epitome of the 5-tool player. And I look at her and I'm like, you haven't had an alcoholic beverage in 20 years. Where is this coming from?
She's genius, and we need to consult with her more often.
Apparently I do. So, yeah. So here it is, folks. I made the fatal flaw. I didn't ask my wife for advice before I did anything. But anyway, what's in a Bobby Burns? Well, a Bobby Burns, Matthew, has 1 ounce of Scotch. It's usually a blended Scotch whiskey, but you do you. Do whatever you want. It also has 1 ounce of Sweet Vermouth because I am still trying to get rid of my Sweet Vermouth. And it also has half an ounce of Benedictine. You combine all of those ingredients in a mixing glass with ice, you stir to your desired dilution, and then you strain that into a Nick and Nora glass or some other stemmed cocktail glass. And once again, it creates something that is different than all of the ingredients inside of it. It is surprisingly rounded and sweet, and I am enjoying it very much. The Bobby Burns. And since I didn't dedicate the cocktail itself to Willie Mays, I'm just going to say cheers, Willie, as I take a sip.
All right. Well, while Ben takes his sip, I am drinking a drink that it's an adaptation of a cocktail called the Daiquiri du Bresil. And there's a story behind it. I forgot to write it down. There's some bartender made it. Sorry, no attribution on this one.
Wow.
But mainly because actually I didn't like his version of it. So what I'm presenting is 2 ounces of rum, light rum, 3/4 ounces of the Banana du Bresil liqueur, and 3/4 ounces of lime juice. So it's basically a banana daiquiri, folks, and it's tasty and light, and I like it. So, what you're gonna do with those ingredients though? You put them in the cocktail shaker with ice, give it a good shake for about 30 seconds, double strain that into a chilled coupe glass, and garnish it with a lime wheel and a banana slice. Unfortunately, I didn't have any bananas tonight, so just the lime wheel for me, but a banana slice would be a nice garnish. So that's what I'm drinking today, the Daiquiri du Bresil. So what are we talking about today, Ben? We are talking about, as you mentioned, the passing of the late, great Willie Mays. Definitely some things to talk about, including digging into some of his MVP years and MVP worthy years. And we'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about the Rickwood field game. And then, of course, our usual lightning round of various topics. So today is Wednesday, June 19th. As we record this podcast, the Giants are 1 game below homeostasis at 36 and 39. And they went 1-2 against the vaunted Chicago Cubs. No, just the Chicago Cubs. And,
the homeostatic Chicago Cubs.
Got off to a good start, won the first game, and you're like, great, that's what you got to do if you want to win 2 out of 3. And then, then the other 2 games happened. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about the Cubs series. So I think we should just get into the Say Hey Kid and what he meant to the Giants. Ben, you were sharing with me beforehand some of your favorite stories that you've heard coming up through that have come up as after Willie Mays' passing. I think those were really good stories and they were hilarious as hell. So,
well, I was sitting there in front of the game and telling my wife, the genius, that the Giants were not able to get to pull a fast one and get Lamont Wade into this one game. And we're going to talk about that later in the show. But I was relating that, and then it was at that moment that John Miller announced that Willie had passed. And, Willie was 93 years old. I think we could all see that he was slowing down for sure. And at that age, I guess it's never really a surprise, but it still felt monumental. And then the rest of the game was just John Miller and Dave Fleming just talking about various Willie Mays stories. And then after the game, they went into the post-game show. And again, that's all it was, right? There wasn't the normal post-game show. For those of you who didn't watch it on TV, they didn't do their normal breakdown of the game. They just immediately went into talking about Willie. And they had a long string of guys come on to talk about Willie. But one of the stories that really stuck out to me was kind of a story about Willie's generosity, but also some of the quirky relationships that he would have with some of the players. And apparently he had this really weird relationship with Kirk Reeder. You know, Woody? And for those of you who don't know, Kirk Reeder has this, it is a very nice, like,
Man cave.
Man cave. Yeah. And I get the sense that it is its own dedicated building. He calls it the shed. Now, those of you who know, you know this is not a shed, right? This is a very nicely appointed man cave that is built by a person who can afford any expense. And he has filled it with sports memorabilia. And he had the shed while he was still a player, and he liked to collect items in there. And one day, and he liked to get things from Willie himself. In fact, Willie visited the shed once. But the story that he told on the postgame show was that Willie one day was wearing some sort of shirt, and Kirk Reeder said to him, "Hey, Willie, I really like that shirt. It sure would look good in the shed." So what does Willie do? He takes it off, and then Kirk Reeder gets him to sign it. And he still has it there in the shed. And that's the kind of guy that Willie was. He would give you the shirt off his back, or at least he would if you're Kirk Reeder. But the really cherry on top to this story was that Kirk didn't stop there. He looked down at Willie's shoes, and he was admiring Willie's shoes, and he was like saying, "Hey, Willie, I really like those shoes. You know, one of those shoes would sure look good in the shed." So Willie was going to give him one of the shoes, and then Kirk was like, "Hey, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, both of those shoes would look good in the shed." So he got Willie Mays to give him the shirt he was wearing and the shoes off his feet, such that Willie had to get flip-flops from Murph. And then he walked out of the clubhouse in flip-flops and his undershirt, his tank top undershirt, and that's how he left the stadium. And it's just one of those stories that was just so hilarious and so incredulous. But also, like, if you know who Kirk Reeder is, it just sounds like the whole thing is ridiculous, but the whole thing is also filled with just sort of like joy and the kind of guy that Willie was with the Giants. Like, Willie Mays was the teammate for everybody who was a San Francisco Giant, whether he played with them or not. And he had such a close relationship, he ended up giving Kirk Reeder like a special gold glove that they had given to him. It was like a Hall of Fame version of the gold glove. And he was so he really wanted Kirk to have it, but he told Kirk that you have to make sure that Barry doesn't see that you're getting this. So you got to take it. You know, Willie had put it there, and through a third party told Kirk Reeder that it was there for him, and Kirk was to go get it immediately and put it in the trunk of his car before the game. And so that was like, I mean, it just spoke to the kind of relationship that Willie had with the Giants organization and with all of their players, and how much he loved the Giants, right? And I think we all know as fans that we loved him, but the thing is like, he loved the Giants and he loved the fans just as much as we loved him. And even though most of us never got a chance to see him play, as old as we are, Matthew, we're not old enough to have had that pleasure. And I mean, you are. but you can't remember, like, when you were 3 years old or whatever. Right. The second story that I thought was super interesting didn't happen last night, but I saw it today on NBC Sports Bay Area was Mike Krukow telling his story. And his story was a little bit different. His story was about his mother, Mike Krukow's mother. And Mike Krukow told a story about how when he was 6 years old or 7 years old, that, his mother would sometimes get him little gifts and things like that. And so one of the things he would get is like baseball cards, a little pack of baseball cards. And, the back of baseball cards, Matthew, they would come with that piece of gum in there that would break if you dropped it.
Yep.
And so Krukow would get that, and he would enjoy the gum. And then there was one time where he got one of those packs, and he was looking through all of the cards, and his mother looks over, and she's like, "Oh, who did you get?" And she sees a Willie Mays card in there, and she just takes it. She says, "Oh, you don't need that." And she took it from him. And he was like, I was 7 years old. I didn't know anything about anything in terms of like who were good players and who weren't. But what's interesting about that is they were a Dodger family. Okay, so fast forward like 10 or 11 years, his mother asks him to go get something from his purse. And he goes into her purse to get the thing that she wants. And he finds there next to the item that he was looking for that very same baseball card. More than a decade later, of Willie Mays in her purse. This woman who was a diehard Dodgers fan had been carrying around this card of Willie Mays for all of that time, and then he talked about how when he got old, when he got traded to the Giants, like she was super excited that he was going to get to meet Willie, and so she was a huge fan of Willie and had, in his words, a crush on Willie. I don't know that Mrs. Kruko would agree, but that's what her son says, and I think that just speaks to the sort of level of impact that Willie had on all of baseball. And I mean, I can't think of a single Dodger, Matthew, that I would respect, that I like even a little bit.
Right.
I give passes to like Dusty, and then I like to forget that Jackie Robinson was a Dodger. Like, he wasn't a Dodger. He was I don't know who he played for, but it wasn't the Dodgers. But that's the kind of player that Willie was he just transcended. He transcended all divisions. He was just so great, and I think also so likable that everybody liked him and revered him, and I think he carried that through all the way to the end. And yeah, so those were the two stories that I remember that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, and I think there are countless others. But one of the things that struck us as we were looking, you go to his baseball reference page and you see 24-time All-Star, 12-time Gold Glover, 2-time All-Star MVP, Rookie of the Year, won the 1954 World Series, won the batting title in 1954, and he was the Sporting News' Major League Player of the Year as well. What's also on, of course, the Hall of Fame, but 24-time All-Star only, and I say only, but only for maybe the best player in the history of the game, a 2-time MVP.
2 times?
And 2 times.
That's
it. That's it.
But Matthew,
well, I mean, you look. So starting in 1954, when he won his first MVP in his third full season of play, starting in 1954 and going through 1966, he had save 1 year where he was 17th in All-Star in MVP voting. He finished in the MVP, the top 6 every single year between 1954 and 1966. And you and I were looking at it, and we feel like maybe he deserved a few more of those MVP trophies.
Well, right. Well, let me just throw another couple stats at you. They didn't have this stat back when he was playing, but you've heard of this thing called WAR, right, Matthew?
Yes.
Wins above replacement, right? In Baseball Reference's WAR, he's 4th all time in WAR, behind Babe Ruth, Barry Bonds, and Ty Cobb, right? And I think most people would say he was a better player. Well, he was a better all-around player than all of those guys.
Yeah.
And most people would say he was a better player than all of those guys except Babe Ruth, and then that's where the arguments start, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. In those years that you mentioned, from 1954 to 1966, he finished as the number 1 player in the National League in WAR every year except for 3 of them. So that means he was the best player all of those years. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So really, Matthew, he should be a 10-time MVP. None of this 2-time BS. So I thought maybe we could look at some of the more egregious robberies and see who beat out Willie in these years when it surely should have been him?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the year after he won his first MVP in 1955.
Okay.
So that year he led the National League in WAR with a 9.2 WAR that year, which was at least half a run or half a WAR point, whatever, than any other player. And Roy Campanella won the MVP that year. Willie finished fourth in MVP voting that year behind two Dodgers, Roy Campanella and Duke Snider, and then Ernie Banks. The Willie Mays led the National League that year with 51 home runs, which was 19 more than Roy Campanella.
This is absurd. This is absurd. Like,
he led the league in slugging. He led the league in OPS that year.
Willie got 0 first place votes that year. 0.
It might have had something to do with the fact that the Dodgers, I think, won the division that year, and the Giants.
This is a robbery. This is a robbery that he is fourth when he was clearly the best player that year. I mean, maybe Snyder gives him a run for the money. Banks hit 44 home runs. But this is just absurd to me looking at these stats. And Roy Campanella beats these other three guys, Snyder, Banks, and Mays. Like, is that because he was a catcher?
It must have been. It must have been like, wow, a good catcher. Let's reward him.
Like those are so rare. It's just absurd. It's absurd to me.
Well, so going into 1956, he finished his 17th, which is one of his worst MVP voting years ever. He still was second in the National League in WAR that year, and right behind Duke Snider. Don Newcomb won the MVP that year from the Brooklyn Dodgers. The top two, again, were Brooklyn Dodgers with Don Newcomb and Sal Maglie. Newcomb was a pitcher who won 27 games that year. Okay. And actually, two other pitchers finished ahead of him. Sal Maglie was also a pitcher, and Warren Spahn. But to finish 17th with the numbers that Willie Mays finished that year, he had 36 home runs. He led the league with 40 stolen bases. Just seemed absurd to finish that low. Well, so the next year, 1957, Willie Mays led the league once again in WAR with 8.3. He finished fourth in the MVP voting behind Hank Aaron, Stan Musial, and Reg Schoendienst. Willie had 35 home runs, which was just behind Henry Aaron, and I think Ernie Banks had more. But he also led the league again in stolen bases and led the league in slugging percentage, but only finished fourth. He got one first place vote that year.
Red Schoendienst.
Yeah.
Dienst? Shane Dienst.
Schoendienst.
Yeah. Well, let's go to 1960 because this is the one that really,
this is the one.
Really gets my goat. Goat.
So Willie had 9.5 WAR, led the National League by. There's no one came close to him in WAR that year, and he had 190 hits. He had a 319 average, 381 on base, and 555 slugging with a 936 OPS. And he finished third in the NL MVP votes. He did not get one single first place vote that year. Instead, Ben, Dick Groat won the MVP that year.
Nope. If your last name is Groat, your first name should not be Dick. Nope. Nope.
So Dick Groat, he did lead the league in hitting that year,
and
with
that's
a 325 batting average, but that's all he did. And his WAR was 6.1. It was a full almost 3.5 WAR behind Willie Mays. And
Don Hoke who was also, you know what these two guys had in common?
They were Pittsburgh Pirates.
That's right, and the Pittsburgh Pirates won the National League pennant that year, and I believe the World Series. And so that's why. I mean, that's why poor Willie got jobbed all of those years. It's because the Giants sucked. Because the Giants did what they do and broke our hearts. And poor Willie had to give up all of those MVPs he should have had because of that. It's just so wrong. It's just so wrong. I mean, it's crazy to look at all of these stats and just. I mean, I would like to think that the voters of today are better than the voters of yesteryear. But they have their own biases these days. But at least they understand. At least they don't just live and die by the standings, right?
Right.
I mean, the standings is a team accomplishment. This is supposed to be who is the best player in the league.
And Willie was the best player in the league many times during that time. And I don't think we have a time to go through all of them, but my goodness, Willie Mays deserved more than 2 MVPs and arguably the best player in Major League history.
What is crazy is he won his first when he was 23 years old, and he won his second when he was 34 years old.
Yeah. And should have won a few more in between.
That's right.
I think.
That's right. He should have won 8 more, in my humble opinion.
All right. Well, rest in peace, Willie. Thank you for the memories. I think it's been really special being a Giants fan and kind of getting to claim Willie Mays as our own. It's been, I think, one of the special parts of rooting for the Giants.
Indeed. Agreed.
All right. So starting Thursday is the Rickwood game, which is being played
on Thursday.
On Thursday, yeah, is being played. Is it Mobile, Alabama?
Birmingham.
Thank you. Birmingham, Alabama. The oldest professional baseball stadium in the United States, Rickwood Field. And just a few things I think that are interesting to Giants fans this year is that Brandon Crawford obviously will be part of the game on Thursday. And interestingly enough, this week he had his first major league start as a third baseman. If you recall with the Giants, he started every single game as a shortstop, only played 1 inning outside of shortstop, and that was when he finally got to pitch in a game. But he did start a game this week to give Nolan Arenado a rest at third base, which I think was interesting. And I'm sure maybe Brandon maybe thought that was a little fun, I'm hoping, because that's something he hadn't done ever in his professional or his major league career.
He was going to do it for a whole season, but then they found termites in Carlos Correa's.
Yeah. Another thing that was kind of interesting is that the Giants were lobbying Major League Baseball to allow Lamont Wade Jr. to play in the game, or at least be active for the game. And in addition, well, I guess the idea was let him be active for that game, and then he might go back on the IL. And
what they wanted was they wanted to be able to activate him for a single game and then put him back on the IL and then keep the clock where it was in terms of his eligibility. Instead of, because they could do this, right? They could activate him. He is eligible to come off the IL. And then they could put him back on the IL. There's nothing wrong with that. But the clock would start again from that day. And the Giants were asking for a forgiveness of that. And while I understand the sentiment, I am not at all surprised that this is what the league decided.
Yeah, it did seem a little. It was a long stretch to think that the MLB would give Lamont Wade Jr. a special exemption. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. He is there though, and will be part of the festivities and be at the game, but he won't be able to play in the game. And then both teams actually get an extra player, and I don't think at this point we know who that's going to be, but I would imagine maybe another pitcher. But who knows? What that's going to look like.
Yeah, so they're treating this like it's a doubleheader kind of game. I think that's because of the extra travel.
Yeah. Okay.
Because like on doubleheaders, the teams get a 27th player.
Yeah. So that, and then finally, just interestingly enough, the first all-black umpiring crew will be during the game on Thursday. What makes it double interesting is that the guy who is going to be the home umpire, a guy named Alan Porter, just so happens to be the most accurate umpire of calling balls and strikes this year. And so I think that definitely helps. So the Giants have been very victim to a really bad umpire earlier this week. And so it just so happened that Alan Porter, who will be behind the plate, is the best ball and strike caller in the majors this year. I
think the Cubs would argue that they were a bigger victim. Although, what was that? Was the umpire Gonzalez? Manny Gonzalez? Yeah. You know, he did, his calls favored the Cubs for sure on his scorecard. but the worst call he made was definitely in the bottom of the ninth on a ball that Camilo threw that was at least a foot outside.
Yeah.
And that was the most egregious pitch, a bad call that Manny Gonzalez made. Manny Gonzalez called such a horrible game in that game that he pushed himself to the top of the leaderboard as the least accurate umpire in Major League Baseball this year. So congratulations to Manny. Well done,
Congratulations,
sir.
Manny. Yeah, going into that game, he was number 2. He left that game being number 1.
That's right.
It takes
That's right.
a special kind of game to vault yourself into the leaderboard like that.
He passed CB Buckner as the worst umpire in baseball. So,
and don't worry, CB Buckner will be umpiring second base on Thursday's game. So we don't have to worry.
Okay. Okay. So
he doesn't even get to call the check swings. He's just going to be out there.
They're keeping him as far away from home plate as possible.
It's time for a lightning round.
Right. Thanks, Bob. Okay. All right. Ben, we a mea culpa here on this one. You said that Nick Avila would clear waivers and he would be a Giant at the end of the week.
That's right. I did promise that to all the Nick Avila fans out there. My apologies to his mother.
So his mother is now going to be wearing orange and black still because he got picked up by the Orioles. Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, how well will Nick Avila pitch for the Orioles?
Not well. He's going to give up an average of 2 runs per appearance. And Orioles fans will throw their popcorn on the ground and throw their hands up in exasperation every time he leaves the game.
Agreed. Although I wouldn't surprise me if he goes on to be like a Cy Young winner, because that's just the way things work with the Giants.
Yes. Okay. And now I have a question for you, Matthew, since we're on this area of mistakes.
Yeah. Okay.
Neither of us apparently were watching the Sunday game when the Giants won 13-6, but Camilo gave up 4 runs. I guess when Camilo came out of that game, because we asked the question, you asked the question, does Camilo care? And so my question back to you, Matthew, is, does Camilo care? I know an ice chest that's in the hospital that might have an answer for you.
Yeah, apparently he cares. Although I might argue, as did Mike Krukow, that maybe he just cared the fact that he was even in that game to begin with. So I don't know. I hope that he cares, and I hope that he certainly took it out on the ice cooler at the when he got in. But I also heard that Bob Melvin and them had a little talk afterwards about being a team player. So I think Camilo's going to come around, but I'm not sure if he was beating that cooler because he pitched poorly, or if he was beating the cooler because he didn't feel like he should be in the game in the first place.
I don't think he would have been beating the cooler if he had gotten a 1-2-3 inning.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. So all of you who wanna badmouth my boy, including you, Mr. Henry, come at me.
All right.
I'm taking on all callers, right? You just come on.
Speaking of taking on all callers.
All right, yeah.
Right now, every team in the National League but the Rockies and the Marlins are within a game and a half of a playoff spot. So my question to you is, how would you settle a 4-way tie for the final wild card? Like, what would be your dream scenario?
Definitely not baseball. Royal Rumble.
Okay.
Death cage match. Here are the rules, though. There can only be one. And I know, so it's all 26 dudes in there, so there's going to be 104 guys in the ring. Mm-hmm. Okay? But there has to be a last man standing. So if there are like 5 guys from the same team left over at the end after the number 6 gets eliminated, and they're all from the same team, they got to keep fighting until there's only one left. Because if they don't, then the guy's team who got knocked out in number 6, they get the spot. Okay. So I want to just see just Royal Rumble, total carnage, no holds barred. Okay, no fish hooking, no biting, no groin shots. But other than that, everything's fair.
Oh, all right. I'm a little bit on the same boat with you, but I think I'd want a tag team of just a tag team tournament, and I think I would want like the Killer Bees of like Brett Wisely and Patrick Bailey, and I feel like they would be scrappy and fast and quick, and so I think they would stand a chance. I think it would just be like the 2024 Giants. They're not favored, but they could pack a punch.
I don't know. I feel like the Rogers twins together, holding hands. They're holding their non-pitching hands, and then they're just like punching the other guys. Okay.
Ooh, okay. I could be persuaded.
Or Sean Jelly and whoever and Brett Wisely.
Yes. Yes, I like it. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, we'll send those ideas off to Major League Baseball. Maybe they can put that in there because it does seem like there are going to be 4 teams that might be tied for that final wild card. All right, we need to wrap this up. Upcoming opponent, of course, is the St. Louis Cardinals. Players who have played for both teams, ones that are near and dear to my heart: Jack Clark, Will Clark, and then Jordan Hicks. Current Giant, and of course, Brandon Crawford. Plenty more, though. You go on the Baseball Reference, there are so many players that have played for the Giants and the Cardinals over their careers.
I was a big fan of Connor Rogers.
Roger Connor?
Roger Connors, whatever.
Hall of Famer, Roger Connor?
Hall of Famer, Roger Connors, yeah. And that's a wrap on the Midweek Review, folks. Thank you for joining us. We will be back on Monday with the big show, where the cocktails will be stronger and the rants will be longer. If you can't wait that long to get your fix, feel free to reach out to us on the social medias. You can find us in Zuckland, the picture place and the Twitter clone place, and where we go by the username Giant Cocktails. You can also find us on the original Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, and Mastodon, because people are still, I guess.
There's a few hanging on. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget, you can also listen to us on YouTube, so run over there to like, subscribe, and comment. But most importantly, be sure to leave us a positive review at your podcasting platform of choice, aka Apple Podcasts or Splitotify. Matthew, you were cherubic today. Keep up the good work. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, Ben. Bye, everybody.
Don't you mean like, wah, flap, 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 wah?
Cherubic. I got my little wings. I got my little bow and arrow. Wing.
I don't understand that. Cupid. Cherub. Baby.
I don't really understand how that's all dealing with love and all that either.
Yeah, anyway. Goodbye!
Thank you for listening to the Giant Cocktails Podcast. Until next time, bottoms up.
Yep. I do edit everything to make myself look good and smart.
Especially that.
Yeah. Watch. I'm going to edit this one so good that by the end of the show, you're going to be the idiot who forgot to make a Willie Mays cocktail, and I will have made a brilliant Willie Mays cocktail. And I will be the genius.
I think Willie would like a really great banana daiquiri.
He probably would. Can you believe the man was banned from baseball? Did you know that?
No.
He was banned from having, after he retired, some old white man banned him from baseball. Him and Mickey Mantle. Because they had these jobs with casinos.
Oh, right.
And now Major League Baseball is like, oh, we want to start our own casino. Ugh. Ugh.